Hello and welcome to the April meeting of the San Diego Filmmakers. Tonight we are presenting something called Video Village, and I'll read you the promo here. In the old days, only the cameraman could see what was being captured. Now everyone can watch what the camera sees. Video Village is where the director, script supervisor, director of photography, and other key personnel can monitor the shots without getting in the way. It can be expanded to provide a view to any interested party. So we have Bob Unger, who right over here, and then also Mr. Greg LeFay. And one thing about Greg you should know, Greg is a former bureau chief for CNN and is also a National Emmy Award-winning journalist for his coverage of the federal building bombing of Oklahoma City. So pretty impressive group here. So take it away, guys.
Sabrina?
Video Village. It's something that I think should be on every set, and there's no reason why it shouldn't, and part of why I wanted to put this on is to give you an explanation of how to do it and why and all those other things. The what, who, why, and how. The what of it is pretty simple, in that it's nice to have a monitor on the set so that other people besides the cameraman can see what's going on. And depending upon what your part is in the production, indicates where you can find value out of that. The who's and the why's. It's ideal if the director is actually looking at the monitor and not standing off to the side of the camera, because what is actually being captured may not be what you're visualizing off to the side. And I'm hoping that later on, Bill's going to make some comments on this, because I know he's had some good experience on this. And I'm talking about from my vantage point of being someone behind the camera scenes and seeing things going on. Another person that could be benefiting greatly is the script supervisor, who's trying to make sure that everything is captured according to what's on the script. All those little details, the continuity issues. Did the glass get refilled a little bit too much? Has it gone down? Has the clock in the background changed? All those little things that need to be watched out for. My bottom line is, from my own little bit of experience as an editor, is you don't want to have to fix it in post if you can catch it on set. I hear an amen in the back there.
I'm surprised you don't have editor up there.
Well, the editor isn't, let's say, the one that's on set going to be watching it. He's the one that's going to benefit downstream.
Oftentimes the editor.
Well,
I can tell you stories about directors and editors.
That's the ...
that's what we want to be able to share in here. That's why we have the ability to network. I'm just trying to, in my list here, give some examples so that you can, in your own minds, oh, true, everyone that's involved with a production has a reason to be looking over the shoulder of what's being shot, and he can either gain some experience for themselves or add some value to the production. The set decorator could be making sure that the different pieces are actually in the shot that should be there. Hair and makeup want to be possibly doing their last looks through this to make sure that there's not a bang covering over eyes or a hat brim that's not screwing something up. The director of photography may be wanting to look at that in order to check some lighting. Now, I will say that depending on the monitor you use, it may not be accurate for some of these things. And there may be some overscan and underscan and some technical issues. But my primary goal, from my experience of having worked with a lot of little independent productions, that having another monitor, being able to have more people on the set watch what's going on, is a big benefit. And I don't know whether Greg wants to add any comments of who he might want to make a comment about.
When you see it on a larger screen, you have a better idea of what it is that you're actually looking at. A dear friend of mine produces radio commercials in a studio that would rival anything Hollywood puts together. It may sound nice in the studio, but what he does is sticks it on a disc, takes it out to his car, and drives around the block and listens to it in the car. The analogy here is you want to see what it looks like on a larger screen. So, just a moment. That's probably Hollywood calling.
Yes, we're hiring anybody. 10 more work.
And When you see it on a larger screen, you have a better idea of what it is that you're actually looking at. You see it the way the folks at home will see it. And if you're actually going to be, if you're shooting a theatrical or a documentary that you intend to air theatrically, what you want to do is you want to bring a projector with you and sit in a tent and watch it on an even larger screen. You will see things that you didn't see. And to Bob's earlier point, in the little tiny 3.5-inch monitor on the camera, that's one thing. But when you blow it up to, in this case, just 23 inches, there's a lot more to see. And you get a much better idea of, if you will, the confidence of your shot. That's why we're here. Lindsay.
I'd like to also just add from the perspective of working with clients in a commercial setting and Video Village. You should also be aware of sometimes it's good to have 2 Video Villages so that you can have an area for the people who are working and to be able to discuss things and look at it, and then the area for the clients and whatever who want to just see the finished product so that you can not sort of intermix, because it's very important for them, for those of us who are working on it, to be able to see. But if you have clients who have to have feedback as well, sometimes their own private area is also very important. It's slightly different if you're doing a theatrical, but if you are doing something which is really, the client's paying the bill, they don't always need to hear the things about the makeup or the placement of the set dressing. So
And to that point, that's why God and eBay invented HDMI splitters, which is what we have down here below. And that way you separate those parties because they have different agendas, and you can feed this to as many places as you wish. Bob?
And there's, the fact that you can get your clients to see it, that's great. You had some other comment back here?
I was just going to comment on your comment regarding seeing it on the screen that the audience is going to see it on. That was a studio shoot on location. And they rented the local, they're out in the boonies, and they rented the local theater in town to run their dailies in the morning so they could see their show on a big screen.
And the fact that you're able to see things as they're being shot. For example, I'm sure all of you have been on a set where somebody is there with the boom and they happen to get between the light and there's some shadow, and the cameraman is just trying to make sure he's got everything framed and may not notice some of those things. And if you can detect that early on, save that poor editor. I was on one shoot and we were shooting inside of a practical location, and we were inside and we were shooting during the daytime, and unfortunately the sun started setting, and as the sun started setting, someone noticed in our monitor that you could start seeing people outside because the lighting had changed, and we didn't have that problem before the sun had started going down. So we had to make some corrections there.
Interesting, you mentioned having perhaps 2 separate areas. One should be relegated to people who can change things, and one relegated to people who can look but not change anything.
I think that's very much to Lindsay's point, yes.
Everyone will have an opinion, but they don't get to vote because the director and the producer and the script person gets to say, that's not right, but don't listen to everyone.
Right, you don't want to overload. And another point is that you don't want your talent to be looking at themselves, otherwise you're like singing the national anthem in a stadium and you get that nasty feedback. Ooh. But on the other hand, it is nice to be able to turn this monitor around while you're setting up your scene, and so your gaffers and other people on set can, oh, this is how that light's going, and I need to tilt that picture, as opposed to having to run back into the camera, let's see, does that look, or ask somebody else. You're able to get some better feedback. So there's a lot of value to a lot of people. And in the interest of moving on, there's some things you don't want to use something like a simple TV monitor for, and that's all these technical issues like exposure, white balance, and some of the technical parameters. That's when you're going to want to look at the actual monitor or a device that actually has the instrumentation to tell you those technical things. But many of the people that just want to see what's on the shot, what's going on in the background, help you make sure there's none of those nasty things, the simple TV will suffice. And so now we want to figure out how we're going to connect this video source to the monitor. Now, most cameras through the years have had different types of outputs to them. The old composite video has been around for a long time. Many cameras, I believe, including this one and the one back there. Len used to use composite video out to a DVD player, which gave him a little bit of a bigger monitor when he was trying to frame his shot as a cameraman. S-Video's been around for a long time. Many of us that have been around for a while also remember the 1394 and FireWire. But now what's coming into more prominence is the HDMI. And then for the more technically, if you're going to be using this serial digital interface, you probably have somebody actually professionally hooking that up for you. So what I'm going to talk about mostly tonight is the HDMI interface, which is what you're going to be dealing with if you just grab a TV set off the Best Buy or Walmart shelf and want to use that as part of your set. So our objective is to simply get from that camera connection to the TV. Now, my background as an engineer, I wound up working a lot of the behind the scenes, that geeky stuff in HDMI. And there's some details of that I'm going to go right over your head with, but I think you'll appreciate where some of the problems you might run into later on in the set. If you look at a stadium, if you take the resolution of this TV, which is 1920 by 1080, so you multiply that, and you figure that each one of those dots has a certain amount of depth, which is represented by 32 bits, you wind up with 66 million bits per frame of information. And so imagine if you had to empty 1,000 Qualcomm stadiums, everybody in a nice, neat organization, every 0.04 of a second is what's going to be passing over that cable. So you need to make sure that that cable is in good shape. And what really is happening, if you look at the side of the connector, you'll notice there's several different pins in there. There are different lanes, wires. One pair of wires sending over red, one pair of wires sending over blue, one pair of wires is sending over green. And if you have even higher resolution, you'll notice some of those black lines, there's a duplicate for some more of the red, some more of the blue, some more of the green. So you want to make sure that all of that goes through smoothly. And if you're bending the cable, you have kinks, that might change and the data might not get through. And one of the reasons why HDMI cables were put into place is for data security. When I was working for Sony, it seemed like one of the most annoying things is we had to protect the content against that very rare case where somebody's going to try to pirate it, but a whole lot of effort goes into trying to make sure things are secure. And one of the things to do that is a device which we can tell that the TV can tell if a camera, or more likely a DVD player or Blu-ray player, is connected, because that way the Blu-ray player knows that a trusted receiver is connected to it. And it knows as soon as it's plugged in, okay, I'm going to do a handshake analysis to see if you're a trusted person. And so the normal cable implementation has a round trip from the one end of the cable back through to the cable source. Now, I have seen a few little cheater cables where things are cheap, where one end of the cable is what you connect up to the TV and one end is what you hook up to the source. And it wasn't until it dawned on me that that's what they were doing. I couldn't figure out why I couldn't just reverse that cable and have my camera hooked up to one end and the TV the other, or switch it around. And it would only work one way, and that's what I found to be the case. So what all this means to you is don't abuse the cable. You can't just bend it around anywhere. It's not like a water hose where you're still going to get water out no matter what you do to it and how you kink it and abuse it. But if you wind up with long cable lengths and kinks and other damage to the cable, the signal may not be getting through. And you can't simply splice one source into another to get multiple outputs, because there is all this handshaking going back and forth to make sure that the signals are legitimately supposed to be getting out. And another thing that happens, and I think it was on your production, we had one monitor and we were monitoring two cameras. And I think what was happening is that when we would switch the monitor between the cameras, the camera got that hot plug detect signal and said, oh, no one's listening to me anymore, and it dropped out of record mode. We couldn't figure out why things would happen automatically. So there's some little things that are going to happen with HDMI you may not have realized ahead of time. So I've already covered the camera, so I think I've covered everything on this list. You saw a question back there?
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment in that I had some personal experience, especially recently during the production, where if you're doing anything that's involving live cast too, if you're not going through a mixer, the moment you use, like say, an HDMI splitter, you have the chances of getting some interruption or degradation in the receiving end on the monitors, because I had that experience where I was basically splitting out to 3 different monitors from a video mixer, which was taking in 2 different video sources. So being able to go direct does, like you said.
And you want to have your recording happen as close to the capture point. Greg was commenting where he had set something up and he had a long cable between his camera and the recorder and things were happening. Is that not correct?
That's right.
I was going to say, when you go into 4K, you have even more of a problem. You got to make sure that your Ethernet cables are certified.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Someplace you go, they don't have a number on it, I don't buy it. You should really get at least 18 for that. Now, on the regular one, I think you can get by with 30, but I do 15 megabytes per second. Then they have an 18 one, which is okay, and it's backgradable to the HD anyway. But then the real top is like 22 megabytes per second. And with those, you can run longer things. They're very expensive.
Oh, yes, they're very expensive. In fact, working with Sony, one of the fellows I was talking to when I was putting this together is part of the group that certifies, part of the standards group for this. And there's quite a bit of work that goes into making sure these cables work, but distance is not your friend.
But what I found out with a slower cable, you put it into a 4K and actually it dims. It's not as bright. And there's things that, it'll work sometimes, but it's not quite as bright. So also to get an inexpensive cable for these things, even HD, that's really cheap. It may not be as bright as if you get a good cable for it.
Right.
Even though it works.
You get what you pay for.
You get what you pay for, but if all you're trying to do is frame your shot that's a little bit dim and you're not depending upon that for your brightness levels and you're using something more like this, again, you get what you pay for and there's some trade-offs between the cost and what you're getting out of it. So there's the problems of connecting up to the camera. That some cameras have the full-size HDMI and others may have a mini or a micro, so you may need an adapter.
Do they make an HDMI cable where it has one input and 2 outputs, like a Y?
Not as a cable, that's why you need the splitter. It's an actual distribution amplifier splitter.
So you need an amplifier
Yes.
to feed 2 monitors?
Right. Yeah, if you look at the impedance values and the differential signal, all that fun stuff, you can't, as I say, it's not like a garden hose where you just tap off onto it. And so you need to figure out what it is you need to match up to your particular camera. Some cameras might have the full-size HDMI and others have the various little sizes. So you want to make sure you've got the right cabling on the set. And we've had the different connection variations. You may just go straight from the camera to the monitor. Some monitors have a pass-through, so you can keep going from the local bigger monitor by the camera to your video village, and others you need to use a distribution amplifier or a splitter like what Greg has here on the floor.
And we'll take you through that later.
Right, we can go through that and all the demo stuff. And going wireless. Having a tail hanging off your camera can be a problem. It's one thing if you're going to be on sticks, but if you've got a handheld, you may be able to drag your tail around. But if you try to do that on a Steadicam where everything is perfectly balanced and you have to get all that just so, that's not the case. So here's a demonstration. Unfortunately, Andy, or fortunately, whatever, he's had to be at NAB, so he was not able to be here to actually give you a demonstration, so he can this demonstration up for us.
Hi, I'm Andy Levison. I'm here at Sunset Cliffs in San Diego to do a demonstration on wireless video monitoring. It's very windy here today, so the Steadicam shots I'm going to show you may be quite shaky, but I thought you'd enjoy the beauty of the area. This is my mobile production cart, which I created for my particular purposes. In this case, I hold my Steadicam, my tripods and monopod, equipment bags, a very large rechargeable battery, a light, and this, my favorite accessory, my wireless video monitoring system.
I love collaborating, so using this system allows several people to view my Steadicam, camera crane, slider, or tripod shots as I'm shooting them. The director, DP, set designer, and others can put their heads together to come up with very creative ideas on how to improve a scene. For example, by having people on camera move differently, or adjusting the lighting, or rearranging a set. And then, after the shot has been recorded, we can play it back immediately to confirm that we've got an excellent shot. I use a Paralinx Arrow Plus wireless transmitter and receiver to transmit both video and audio. This wireless system, as well as the Sony 32-inch TV, are powered by rechargeable batteries. I attach the wireless transmitter to the top of my camera and then run an HDMI cable from my camera to the transmitter. The wireless receiver is mounted on the back of the TV. An HDMI cable connects the receiver to the TV. The complete system allows me to roll all this equipment easily around a location. When I'm shooting at multiple locations in a day, making it impractical to set up all this equipment multiple times, I use this car mount system that I created. The wireless video monitoring system is securely mounted in the back of my car, and my Steadicam is mounted on a small customized cart. This allows me to pull up to a location, and within a couple of minutes, I'm wearing the Steadicam, and the director and his or her team are wirelessly monitoring my shots. This has proved to be very useful, and I'm happy to offer it to my clients.
I hope this information has been helpful to you. I'm Andy Levison.
So there's several, I basically just went online and looked, and like with any technology, things change rapidly, so your best bet is to find out what's current. And these are some of the devices that I found that are available. There are three pretty straightforward, just essentially wireless extension cords. And I will add that keep in mind that these are using those same frequencies that you're using for all of your other wireless devices. So you can't expect that they're going to be perfect in all situations, and the band may be a little bit crowded. The bottom one is from Livestream, and basically intended for you to be able to stream what's coming from your camera source to the web. And you can find it anywhere on the internet. And I'm sure you're basically curious as to how much of these are, and these are just some prices as to what I found online. Another thing to point out is that on the back of all these monitors is a VESA bolt pattern. So you can take the things off these stands, and actually Greg has a mount on the back, but it doesn't match up to any of the C stands we have here to show you. But you can put a mount on the back of these to connect up. Oops. We should hook the camera up and show. Anyway, you'll be able to look at it later.
Greg, you make a nice C-stand.
At your service.
And this particular one is that I found a picture of in Google Images is $92 from Ergomart. And if you're handy with things, you can probably make your own. One caution I will tell you is remember that these screws are metric. So if you decide you find yourself a plate that'll work, that the screws you typically pull out of your drawer at home or from some bin at Home Depot, make sure that you get a metric one because you'll strip your threads. So at this point, we're going to give you basically just some demos of how this works and open it up to more questions.
And I'm going to walk you through the connections that we have here tonight, the way we set this one up.
The
There's
RF unit that transmits that he was using, what's the range of that?
It varies. Sometimes you can get as much as 300 feet out of them, but you have to consider the frequency, you have to consider where you are. There's a cheap cheat, if you will. Hang on a second. $200 at Best Buy.
Really?
Yeah. It's HDMI. It goes in both directions, like a good HDMI. It has extremely limited range. I bought this so that I could watch the baseball games out of the barbecue in the backyard. But it has AC powered at both ends, but you just strap a little battery pack to it, go to Radio Shack and get the adapter. It's $200 and you get what you pay for. But if you're talking about a short range, if you're doing something literally line of sight within about 50 feet or so, there are inexpensive solutions to this. And if you go to B&H like Bob did, there are a lot of different options that you have there. What we did here was, coming out of the camera, this is a Sony EX3. It's now been supplanted by other models, but this camera does not have HDMI out. It's one of the last that does not. But what it does have is SDI, which is probably the most direct path to the sensor anyway. What I've done is I've come out of the SDI down to a little converter that converts SDI to HDMI. I do a lot of corporate shooting. I'm in conference rooms that have a big monitor on the wall already. And so what they want is they want to feed it into their HDMI port. So I go from SDI. I have a little HDMI converter that you can buy at Video Gear. It's about $300, or you can rent them. That takes the HDMI out to a splitter. That splitter comes up to this little fellow here and goes over there. There are other features to this as well. This gives you waveform, it gives you peaking, it gives you that technical stuff that, that Bob was talking about. It happens that this little guy has probably a very limited little battery life, but I'll give you a quick example.
Do you want to hook this, use this other camera on that? And
yeah, I think we'll wind up shooting that separately.
Okay.
But what will happen here if everything works properly? Okay, so you see our subject here. This is an almost pixel by pixel image of what is there. You have a number of options with this. You'll get to see what your waveform looks like. You get a true idea of what your exposure is. You can also do what we call false color, which is giving you a good idea of what your exposure is, how bright or dim your picture is. These little monitors up here won't do it. This won't do it either. And unless you use a light meter, and you really should learn how to use a light meter. I'm sorry I'm old, but that's the way it is. But this will give you a real good idea of how bright or how dark your picture is. We're a little dark, so we can force it up to a little bit brighter, or we can bring it down a little bit darker. And that is a really good way of figuring out what you want to do. Also, if you're going to distribute in a different ratio, a lot of these will give you different ratios as well, so you can see how you want to frame your image and do it that way. Aspect ratio, yes. And then this one is peaking, which gives you focus assist, which will give you a real good idea of how close you are to the perfect focus. With a lot of the cameras that are in use today, especially the single sensor cameras, the depth of field can be very, very shallow. You can have the nose in focus and the ear soft. When you shoot women, everybody knows, focus on the ear, it softens the face a little bit, and everybody likes that. Especially now in high def, and when you're talking about 4K, it becomes all the more critical. And I'm sorry. Yes. At that point, you're not using brush-applied makeup, and you go on from there. These little guys have gotten to be really inexpensive comparatively of late. This one sold for about $1,200. You can rent them now for about $50 a day. And if you're serious about your shooting, you want this on your set. Sir?
Since it can do exposure, can it do rudimentary color grading? Live?
It can tell you how true your colors are if you're shooting a color chart. As you know, color charts vary. It depends, if you want to use the Old English color chart, if you want to use NTSC or whatever. But it will give you, by your vector scope over here, it will tell you how true your color is. But what you really want to do is you want to see how faithful your image is. And that's when you go back to the full frame and view it that way. Does that help? Yeah. Sir?
What did you call that little monitor?
It's a standard on-camera monitor, you call it an on-camera monitor with scopes, and any of the shops will tell you there are 1,000 versions of this in a number of different sizes, but this one now I think is about $900 now, and they're incredibly reliable. They're really nice. This is a 7-inch. I would rather have gotten the 9-inch. I just couldn't afford it at the time. Yeah. So then when you get out here, as we said before, this is pretty much what you're going to see at home. I happen to use a 23 because I got 2 of them at a really good price, and it's an LG, which is a really nice television set. But to Bob's point earlier, there's a lot of circuitry in here that does a lot of averaging, that makes your picture look as nice as it possibly could, given the circumstances. Also, depending on the quality of your conversion equipment, the quality of your splitter, the quality of the lines, this may or may not be what is truly being recorded on your camera card. But it's the ideal confidence monitor for framing, for general exposure, for comparative exposure, for comparative lighting. You really need to see this. And to Lindsay's point, this gives the people out there who pay attention to what it is you're doing an opportunity to see what you're doing without crowding you on the set. As many, and I'll conclude, as many of us know, there is but one God on the set, and his name is director. So pay attention to what the director says. And if you need to provide some input, you go to the director and make sure that person knows. I hope this helps.
And another point is that many places where you really don't have a lot of money in your production, you may find that there is already a TV nearby. How many of you have actually shot in a home and there in the family room or the living room where you're doing, or a bedroom, you've actually got a TV? If you've got the cabling to hook up to your monitor, everybody can be watching it. Greg was commenting that they hook it up to the TV in their conference room when they're shooting some of his corporate videos. So just by having the capability to hook up and take advantage of it, more eyeballs can be on it to see what you're capturing, that artistic look. True, it's not necessarily corner to corner, there may be some pixels off to the side, but it gives you the opportunity for more people to have their eyeballs on it, as long as they don't bother the director too much. There's that balance, and you've got to control your set in that way anyway. But the fact you can get more people with eyeballs on it to see what's going on, you can save that poor editor a lot of grief downstream if something wasn't in the set, in the shot. Like, nothing like a bright chrome paper towel dispenser in the background, which acts like a mirror, but nobody was thinking of, but you catch 2 or 3 people in the background milling around in the reflection. There's little things that somebody else didn't think about that someone is going to see.
Sir.
I was going to say, it's been a while, but I think sometimes when you go looking for monitors, I think they have combo monitors where they actually for computers, and then they also have plugins for television sets. I think they still have those. I mean, it's been a while. So I'm just thinking, it's a matter of expense. Spend a few dollars more if you're looking for a monitor, for a new monitor for your computer. And then when you want to go out and shoot or whatever, just take the thing and take it out, and then you plug in the video part. But you got to know that ahead of time before you buy it. Otherwise, you're buying 2 monitors, pay twice the price. So that's a way of keeping the cost down.
To your point earlier, you get what you pay for.
If you're lucky.
Well, it's not that much more, actually. 2 monitors is much more expensive than buying a combination monitor and TV.
Yeah, well, nowadays, a monitor, if you get it as a monitor, just means you didn't put a tuner in it. And so you can go and buy a TV that actually has the TV, but virtually every TV has an HDMI input to it. And another thing that came to my mind is Greg was commenting about hooking these up and how these look. One thing that really kind of struck me is wearing 2 hats when I was working for Sony. I'd be working in the advanced television group, and here we're trying to advance the frame rate, 240 frames per second, to try to smooth out the picture. And everybody in the production side is, I want to get it film like at 24 frames per second. So it's almost like at cross purposes. So you use something like this, you're going to see the exact frame rate is what you're shooting, where this may be trying to make things look better. It's like when you upload something to YouTube and it says, we noticed some shakiness in it. Do you want us to fix it for you? And wait a minute, that's what I was trying to get out of it.
Frank?
This is wonderful, except that you're missing about 50%, which is SAF.
Join us in June.
So if you have two areas, one for your client and one for your director, your client should be in another room with speakers. Your director and producer is usually on set, so they need headsets. So you either need to hardwire or use something like a Comtech or IFB.
I would actually differ with you. I think sound is a lot more important when you actually, a mistake is sound, it's really hard to fix. With a little, we can gloss over some picture problems pretty easily, but a sound glitch or background hum or any of those nasty real life things is a pain.
If the camera has the HDMI port on it itself, doesn't any sound going through the camera get transferred on the wire?
Yes, and frequently I find you need to make sure you mute that so you don't wind up with feedback.
Yeah.
But it also means that you can unmute that sound and you can play back for more people to see it in real time. Because you don't want to have everyone having to crowd around that little monitor here. Let's see, what did that look like? And of course you can have a curtain around this if you're out in the bright sunlight so people can see it near the set when you're doing an outdoor shoot in bright direct sun. You may have a nice ND filter on the camera, but it's hard to tell exactly what's being captured without some sort of monitor.
Also another consideration when you're getting these TVs, make sure there's some kind of solid glass finish on the front because they get terrible glare. You want to get a sort of
Again, you get what you pay for. You get what you pay for, but you may already have a TV in your bedroom, the spare one that you got at the Super Black Friday sale at Walmart or something. It'll still work.
It does have a matte finish. That's a big problem in some way.
Yes.
Yes.
So when going at the wired route, how far can you go with the HDMI without signal loss? And then how do you handle changing camera angles and keeping the set safe?
Well, you have that problem. Okay, you've got two questions there. The distance is probably 10 meters is sort of like the maximum you're going to want to have an HDMI cable. After that, you're pretty much guaranteed to see some degradation, especially if you've got the higher bit rates or frame rates.
So you're going saying 10 meters amplifier and then another 10?
You could potentially start doing that, but then you're getting more expensive. If you're going to be doing some of that long distance stuff, that's when you may want to be looking more at the professional SSDI. But if you're doing things like with the typical amateur shoot with a Canon SLR or something like that, which only has the HDMI, you're probably not going to need that much distance on it. I know that, I remember, how often have you shot, for example, in a bathroom and you can't get that many people in there and other people need to see it? I was on a shoot not too long ago and our script supervisor was so cramped in the corner that she had some chest pains, which turned out to be a pinched nerve, but it was suspicious that she may have had some deep vein thrombosis from having her legs cramped together for so long, sitting there in a corner. So if on that set we'd actually had a cable with us, which we didn't, unfortunately, to run to the TV, which was on the other side of the wall where we could have all watched it, that wouldn't have been a problem.
Yeah. To your other question about set safety, I think everybody knows that. If you walk slowly and look down a lot on set, it's probably the safest thing. There are many of there's a lot of jargon that has to do with the term crossing and things like that. If you keep telling people what you're doing as you're doing it, that's probably the safest thing to do. Just walk slowly and tell people what's up. Yeah.
And if you're on sticks, especially, it's not that much different than just having a stinger across the floor, and you may have some power running to your camera. See, you've got cable management on any set anyway. It's just another cable to be watching out for.
Yeah. Yes. How susceptible are the HDMI cables to any sort of electrical interference? Like hum and things like that you'd get on an analog cable that are kind of strung and coiled around together.
The good cables will serve you well. Yeah. This is probably the cheapest cable I could find. It's good for about 6 feet. If I linked more than one of these together, things would go south. Yeah, but the usual rules about crossing, not parallel, things like that. You know, if you keep doing this, you're probably okay.
Yeah, the HDMI, putting on the GeekHat, it's differential twisted pair, so that as long as the pairs in that, any magnetic field or anything that's coming around it is going to affect both of them equally, so it neutralizes out. So that's not a problem.
Final consideration is, you know, when you're in sound, it's bad enough when somebody takes a truck and runs over. You really got to be careful when you're paying $200 and some for like a 15 or 20 foot HDI that nobody runs over that cable.
Yeah.
You're not going to right away, but you get into 3 or 4 productions and all of a sudden something goes wrong and here you're without a cable. So you should be quite aware of that.
Right.
And if that becomes an issue, you buy the cable guards at your typical supply stores. Yeah. Yeah.
That is an expensive resource. Those connections at the end, the cable itself, it's something you don't want to abuse. Yes?
My wife's a singer, and she takes her audio equipment with her wherever she does a gig. And the first thing that might go is a cable. So my mantra is, the cable is your Achilles heel. So take care of it with much care and have backups.
And it's things that go wrong with the cable aren't necessarily visible. You can't check it real easily.
Sir.
Funny story, Greg. I was doing a infomercial, and it was multiple cameras, and the client didn't really want to spend, I think my estimate was like $1,000 for professional monitors. Said, don't worry about it, we'll take care of it. Is that, you sure? You sure? Yeah, that's all taken care of. So it showed up on set. He had, and this client is notorious for this, had a whole stack of boxes that he had gotten at Best Buy. All the same TVs and everything like that. Look at this, I can take them back when we're done, zero cost. He was really thrilled with himself. The problem being was they all used the same code on the remote control. So if you wanted to just turn the sound down on one, the sound on another one might go up, or to change the color or whatever. It was a disaster just trying to, or you have to go into another room to shield the remote control so it wouldn't affect one, and then bring it back and take another one. It was a comedy. You spend so much time just trying to work that out. So yeah, you get what you pay for. The professional monitors may have been a good call.
But you have to take them all back.
I think the ones that he threw through a window.
Well, that problem can be actually solved by gaff tape. You put gaff tape over all the sensors except for the one you're trying to adjust.
It was. I think it was. It wasn't working. We tried something like that. I don't know if it was RF or what.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah, my intent with this is to make sure everyone's aware how easy it is with basically just getting the cable to go from whatever camera you're using to the monitor or TV you probably already have nearby on set, and the value to that. And from there, your costs go up, but then you have more of a production budget if you're doing something where your costs are going to go up. Again, you get what you pay for, and it's worthwhile to get started so you can see the benefit of this. I think most people, once they've seen the benefit of having a monitor on set, feel that it's worth the expense, whatever that is, to make it happen.
You're welcome to stand and mix if you would. We would appreciate it if you would help us with the chairs, and we'll have some time to network and learn from each other. And our thanks to Sabrina. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, just grab.